The rain came down over Blackwood House in thin, driving sheets, turning the gravel paths to dark mirrors. In the servants' hall, the fire had been allowed to die to embers. Mrs. Clara Henschel stood with her hands folded at her waist, the heavy ring of household keys still on her belt, and listened to the new steward pronounce her fate. "You are dismissed," Mr. Pike said. He was a narrow man with a voice like a closing ledger. "Effective immediately. Your presentation is not suited to a house of this consequence." Clara did not blink. She had been housekeeper at Blackwood for 9 years. She had managed its linen, its provisions, its quarrels, and its grief. She had buried 3 footmen during the fever year and delivered the cook's daughter herself when the midwife was snowed in at the crossroads. She had served the late Duke without complaint and the young Duke without a single error. And now she was being dismissed because her body was not the shape a steward wished to see in a corridor. "I understand," she said. Her voice was low and even. Pike had expected tears. He had prepared a thin smile for them. He did not get it. "You may collect your things. A cart has been arranged for the village." "I have no things beyond a small trunk and a child's cloak I have mended," Clara said. "I would like to say farewell to Daisy." Pike's mouth tightened. "The scullery child is needed in the kitchen. There is no time for sentiment." Clara looked at him for a long, quiet moment. She did not raise her voice. She did not argue. She simply turned and walked out of the servants' hall with the same dignity she had brought to 1,000 mornings of duty. In the kitchen, the cook was weeping into a cloth. The footmen stood against the wall, their hands limp. No one spoke. They watched Clara climb the narrow stairs to her room and come down again carrying a small wooden trunk and a folded woolen cloak. She paused at the kitchen door. "Tell Daisy," she said to the cook, "that her dress is under the loose board beside the scullery hearth. The blue thread is finished. The hem is sewn twice. She must not tell Mr. Pike." The cook nodded, unable to speak. Clara opened the back door. The rain came in at once, cold and insistent. She did not look back. She walked out across the stones, past the dripping yews, past the gate where the new under-gardener pretended not to watch her go. The cart had not arrived. She did not wait for it. She began to walk toward the village with her trunk in her arms and the rain beating against her face. From the high window of the study on the 2nd floor, the Duke of Ashworth stood in shadow and watched her go. Lord Julian Ashworth had returned to Blackwood House an hour earlier, unexpected and unannounced. He had meant only to collect his estate ledgers and return to London before dawn. But the house had felt wrong from the moment he stepped inside. The air had been heavy, the servants too silent. He had come to the study window and seen a woman in a gray dress walking away through the storm, her back straight, her arms wrapped around a wooden trunk. He did not know her name. He knew only that her dignity in the rain made something twist in his chest. Then he saw the child. She came running from the kitchen door, small and barefoot, her hair a wet tangle. She wore a dress made of what looked like old table linen, cream and brown, with a faded woven pattern stitched roughly at the sleeves. The child stumbled to a stop at the gate and called out a word. The woman turned. Even through the rain, Julian saw her face change. Saw her bend down, set the trunk on the stones, and take the child's face in both hands. The child was Daisy. The dress was a tablecloth, and the woman, whoever she was, had been turned out of his house. Julian did not move. His hand rested on the window frame. His thumb pressed against the cold glass. He watched the woman kneel in the mud and hold the child against her, and he understood in that instant that something had happened in his house that he had not authorized, had not known, and would not ignore. He pulled the bell cord with one sharp tug. "Bring Mr. Pike to me," he told the footman who appeared. "At once." The footman went white. Below in the rain, Clara rose to her feet. She did not see the Duke at the window. She did not know that the little girl's homemade dress, stitched from stolen table linen and a servant's exhausted love, had just altered the course of more than one life. She picked up her trunk. She took Daisy's hand, and she walked on, Julian Ashworth did not sit behind his desk when Pike entered. He stood at the window with his hands clasped behind his back, and he did not turn when the door opened. "Who dismissed the housekeeper?" Pike's step faltered. "Your Grace, I—" The question was not difficult. Mrs. Henshaw was let go for reasons of presentation. She was unsuited to the visible running of a great house. I believed it best to act before the county took notice. Julian turned. He was not a man who raised his voice in anger. His father had taught him that loudness was the tool of those without other weapons. So when he spoke, his voice was quiet, measured, and it cut deeper than any shout. "You removed a woman from my household without my knowledge, without written cause, and without a single reference to her 9 years of service. You then stood in my study and spoke of her as if she were a portrait hung in the wrong light." Pike swallowed. The girl, Daisy, there was also the matter of stolen linen. Mrs. Henshaw made the child a dress from a household tablecloth. It was not hers to take. "A tablecloth," Julian repeated. "Yes, Your Grace. A child in my own household was wearing a tablecloth because she had nothing else. And your response was to dismiss the woman who clothed her, not to clothe the child yourself." Pike's mouth opened. No sound came. Julian walked past him to the door. "You are dismissed. You will leave Blackwood House within the hour. If I see your face again on any property I own, I will have you arrested for malfeasance." He did not look back to see Pike's face collapse. He was already in the corridor, taking his greatcoat from a trembling footman, ordering the carriage. "Where to, Your Grace?" "The village road. She cannot have gone far." The carriage rolled out into the storm. The lantern swung, throwing wild shadows against the hedgerows. Julian sat forward, his eyes on the road, the rain hammering the roof like a warning. He kept seeing the woman kneel in the mud, the child's bare feet, the tablecloth dress, brown and cream, patched at the seams. They found Clara at the crossroads, by the old mile-post. She stood in the rain with her trunk at her feet and Daisy pressed against her side. The child had stopped shivering because the cold had begun to settle into her bones. Clara had wrapped her woolen cloak around both of them, but it was soaked through. She looked up as the carriage stopped. For a moment, her face showed only the tired patience of a woman who had learned long ago that carriages meant either work or worse. The door opened. Julian stepped down into the rain without his hat. "Mrs. Henshaw." Clara's eyes widened, then recovered. "Your Grace, I have come to ask you to return." Clara's chin lifted. The steward made his position clear. "The steward is gone. I have dismissed him." The rain ran down Julian's face. His hair was already dark with it. He did not seem to notice. He was looking at Clara with an expression she could not read, not pity, not guilt, something harder and more searching. "You were let go without cause," he said. "I do not allow that in my house." Clara looked at Daisy, then back at the Duke. "I will come back," she said slowly, "not as housekeeper but as a witness. If there is to be a matter of stolen linen, I will answer it, but I will not walk back into a servants' hall that threw me out." Julian's jaw tightened. "The linen is not the matter. The child's dress is not the matter. The matter is that a man under my authority acted without honor. I would ask you to return as head housekeeper with my full protection. But if you will only come as a witness, then come as that. Only do not let the child freeze." Clara stared at him. She had served aristocrats long enough to know how rarely they apologized and how carefully they protected their power. This man was different, and the difference frightened her more than the cold. "I will accept your carriage," she said at last, "for Daisy." Julian opened the door himself. He lifted the trunk into the carriage with his own hands. He did not ask a footman. The rain soaked through his coat and his linen shirt. Then he helped Daisy up into the seat and waited while Clara gathered her wet skirts and climbed in. Inside, the silence was close and full. Daisy fell asleep against Clara's side. Clara stared straight ahead. her hands folded over the sleeping child. Julian sat across from her, his own hands on his knees, and watched the road unspool through the streaming window. He wanted to speak. He could not find the words. He had seen women weep over a torn hem. He had never seen a woman walk through a storm with her head high and a child's hand in hers. Clara felt his gaze and did not turn. Her heart was a hard knot under her ribs. She had been dismissed, degraded, and now she was being returned like a parcel. She should feel grateful. She felt only tired and something else she refused to name. The carriage turned through the gates of Blackwood House. The house rose up before them, black against the storm, and Clara Henshaw knew that whatever happened next, she would never walk through this rain again. She would walk through fire instead. The servants' hall had never been so quiet. Julian summoned every member of the household staff, from the butler to the lowest kitchen boy. He had Clara and Daisy wait in the morning room, where a fire was lit and tea brought. Clara did not sit in the best chair. She sat on a footstool beside the sleeping Daisy, her hand resting on the child's hair. Julian stood before the assembled staff with no notes and no steward. His voice carried. A woman who has served this house for 9 years was dismissed without cause. A child under this roof was left in a dress made from old linen because no one thought to clothe her. I want to know who knew, and I want to know now. At first, no one spoke. Then the cook, Mrs. Bell, stepped forward, her face red and wet. I knew, Your Grace. We all knew. Mr. Pike said any man or woman who spoke would be turned out without reference. He sold Daisy's only proper dress at the market in Bowden, said she was too small to notice. Mrs. Henshaw took an old tablecloth from the rag bin because she had nothing else to give the child. She stayed up 3 nights sewing it. Julian's eyes moved over the faces of the other servants. One by one they nodded. The footmen looked at the floor. The housemaids wiped their eyes. And no one came to me. Begging your pardon, Your Grace, Mrs. Bell said, but you were in London. Mr. Pike said he had your authority. We did not know it was a lie. Julian stood for a long moment without speaking. The fire crackled. Outside, the rain had begun to lighten, but the sky still hung low. Mr. Pike is gone, he said. He will not return. As of this hour, Mrs. Henshaw is head housekeeper of Blackwood House with full authority over all female staff and all household accounts. Anyone who finds her rule too strict may take their reference and leave. Anyone who stays will treat her with the respect her service has earned. He paused, his voice softened. The child Daisy will be moved from the scullery. She will sleep in the schoolroom wing. She will eat in the dining room when I am in residence. She will be taught to read and write by the estate tutor, and she will wear proper clothing purchased from my accounts. The staff stared at him as if he had announced a revolution. Perhaps he had. When Julian returned to the morning room, Clara was still sitting on the footstool. She had not moved. Daisy lay curled on a settee, wrapped in a clean blanket. You should sit in the chair, Julian said. Clara looked up. I am comfortable. A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. You are not. You are making a point. Yes, she said, I am. Julian sat in the chair opposite her. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. I have asked the staff to accept your authority. I have arranged for Daisy to be educated. I have purchased her clothing. Tell me what else you require. Clara studied him. She saw a man used to command, not a man used to asking. The asking seemed to cost him. I require nothing for myself, she said. I accepted your carriage for Daisy. I will accept your position for Daisy. But I am not your charity, Your Grace. I can find work elsewhere. I am not offering charity. I am offering employment. Then I accepted. Julian nodded. He rose and walked to the window. The rain had stopped. A thin, watery light was breaking through the clouds over the parkland. The child will sit at my table, he said. I will not have her hidden in the kitchen. Clara stood. She walked to stand a few feet behind him. close enough to see the way his shoulder blades tensed under his coat. "You saw the dress," she said quietly. "You saw the tablecloth." "Yes." Most men would have looked away. Julian turned. He was closer than Clara had realized. His eyes were a deep blue, almost black in the dim light. "I am not most men," he said. The words hung between them. Clara felt something shift in her chest, something she had not allowed in years. She stepped back, smoothed her skirt, and gave him a small, composed nod. "If you will excuse me, Your Grace, I should see to the kitchens." She left him standing at the window. But as she walked through the door, she could still feel his gaze on her back, like a hand laid between her shoulder blades. That evening, Daisy sat at the long dining table, a small figure in a new blue dress, her hair brushed and tied with ribbon. Julian sat at the head, and he spoke to her as if she were a lady of the county. Clara stood by the sideboard, watching. When Daisy laughed at something Julian said, Clara turned away and pressed her hand over her mouth. She would not let herself hope. She would not let herself feel. But that night, she lit a candle in her room and sat by the window, and for a long time she watched the dark shape of the house against the sky, thinking of a man who had looked at a tablecloth and seen a child instead of a scandal. The invitation to the Penford Assembly arrived 3 days later. It was addressed to the Duke of Ashworth, as all such invitations were, but the note inside made the real purpose clear. The county wished to see the housekeeper who had been turned out and brought back, and to judge for itself whether the Duke had lost his reason. Clara did not want to go. She said as much to Julian in the estate office. "I have no business at a public assembly," she said. "I am your housekeeper." Julian looked up from his ledger. "Daisy has been invited as my ward. She is a child. She should not attend without a woman to look after her." "Then send the governess." "The governess has a cold." Clara's eyes narrowed. "You are managing this badly, Your Grace. The truth is you wish me to attend because you want the county to see your charity up close." Julian set down his pen. He did not smile, but something in his face shifted. "I wish you to attend because I will not hide you in my own house. You were wronged. I have corrected it. The county may think what it pleases, but I will not allow them to think I am ashamed of you." Clara stared at him. Her heart was beating too fast. She folded her hands tightly to keep them still. "I will attend," she said, "for Daisy." She did not add that she would need a dress because her gray wool was still mud-stained at the hem. Julian did not ask. The next morning, a seamstress arrived with 3 gowns in Clara's size, plain but well cut, in deep blue and brown and a dark rose. Clara did not ask how the seamstress had known her measurements. She suspected the cook. The assembly rooms at Penford were crowded and loud. Clara entered behind Julian, Daisy's hand in hers. The child wore white with a blue sash. Clara wore the dark rose, a high-necked gown that made her skin glow and her dark hair look richer than it was. She had allowed no curl papers, no rouge. She would not pretend to be something she was not. The whispering began before they had crossed the floor. "That is the housekeeper. Good heavens, she is broad as a barn door. And the Duke parades her like a prize sow." Clara heard every word. She kept her spine straight and her face smooth. She walked to the side of the room where the chaperones and older women sat, and she found a seat near the window. Daisy stood beside her, unsure. "Come, child," Clara said quietly. "We shall watch the dancing." Julian was surrounded by men who wished to speak of politics and women who wished to be seen speaking to him. He did not remain with them. He crossed the room to where Clara sat. "You should dance," she said. "I should stand here," he replied. "People will talk more if you do." "People are already talking." Clara looked up at him. "Then let them, but do not make this worse by treating me like a guest. I am the housekeeper. I know where I belong." Julian's jaw tightened. Before he could answer, a voice cut through the low murmur. "A housekeeper of her size ought not to draw attention," said Lady Penford, loud enough to be heard across the room. "The Duke should be careful. The ton will think he has lost his taste." The room went still, not silent but still a held breath. 100 eyes turning. Clara did not look at Lady Penford. She looked at the window, at the dark glass, at her own reflection in the candlelight. Her face was calm. She folded her hands in her lap and said nothing. Then Julian spoke. His voice was not loud. It did not need to be. "Madam," he said, and the word was like a stone dropped into water. "The only attention drawn here is to your lack of kindness. I was not aware that the quality of a woman's character could be measured in inches. But if it can, then Mrs. Henshaw has more character in one lifetime than you have shown in this room tonight." Lady Penford's face went white, then red. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Julian turned to Clara and extended his hand. "Mrs. Henshaw," he said, and his voice was gentle now, "will you do me the honor of dancing with me?" The room held its breath. Clara looked at his hand. She should refuse. She should stay in her chair and let the moment pass, let the gossips have their scandal and go home. But Daisy was watching her with wide, frightened eyes, and Julian was standing before her with his hand outstretched, and he had just called her character the finest thing in the room. She placed her hand in his. "Yes," she said, "I will dance." He led her to the center of the floor as the musicians, startled, began a country dance. Clara had not danced in years. Her body remembered. She moved with a grace that surprised her, her skirt sweeping, her head high. Julian watched her as he moved, and there was no mockery in his face. There was something else, something that made Clara's breath catch. The other dancers made space for them. The whispers grew, then faded. By the end of the dance, half the room was watching with expressions that had shifted from contempt to confusion to something close to wonder. When the music ended, Julian bowed. Clara curtsied, low and steady. Daisy clapped from the side of the room. A few others joined her. Clara looked at Julian. Her heart was beating too fast, her skin too warm. She wanted to look away. She could not. "You have made me a spectacle," she said quietly. "No," he said. "You made yourself a story worth watching. I merely stood beside you." He offered his arm. Clara took it, and as he led her back to Daisy, she felt the eyes of the county on her, and for the first time in her life she did not shrink from them. She was terrified, but she did not run. The Dowager Duchess of Ashworth arrived at 10 in the morning, unannounced, with 2 carriages, 4 maids, and an expression like a closed gate. Clara saw the carriages from the window of her office. She had been reviewing the week's accounts, but the sight of the Ashworth crest on the carriage door made her hands still. She had never met the Dowager. She had heard enough from the other servants to know that this woman had ruled Blackwood House for 30 years before the late Duke's death, and that she had not relinquished that rule willingly. Mrs. Bell appeared at Clara's door. "Her Grace wishes to see you in the drawing-room," the cook said. "She asked for you by name." Clara rose. She smoothed her gray gown, pinned a stray curl, and walked to the drawing-room with her head high. The Dowager stood by the fire. She was tall, thin, and elegant, her hair white, her eyes a pale blue like a winter sky. She wore a gown of silver-gray silk that must have cost more than Clara's yearly wages. She did not sit. She did not smile. "So," she said, "you are the housekeeper who has turned my son's head." Clara stood just inside the door. "I am the housekeeper of Blackwood House, your Grace. I have turned no heads." "Do not be clever with me, Mrs. Henshaw. I know what has happened. My son dismissed a steward, reinstated a servant, dressed a scullery child in silk, and danced with his own housekeeper at a public assembly. The county is laughing at him, at us." "The county may laugh at whatever pleases it," Clara said. "I did not ask the Duke to dance. I did not ask for the dress or the position or the kindness he showed Daisy. I accepted what was offered because the child had nothing." The Dowager's eyes narrowed. "And what do you want from my son?" Clara met her gaze. I want nothing from your son, your grace. I want only what is just for that child. She was orphaned, stripped of her clothes, and left to freeze. I stitched a dress from a rag so she would not be naked. If that is a crime, I will answer for it. But I will not apologize for keeping a child alive." The silence in the room was long and sharp. The dowager moved to a chair and sat. She did not take her eyes from Clara's face. "I have come to offer you a way out," she said. "A cottage in Scotland, a generous severance, and letters of reference that will see you placed in any great house in Britain. You may bring the child. You may live quietly, but you will leave Blackwood House and you will never see my son again." Clara did not flinch. "I refuse." "Then you admit you have ambitions." "I admit nothing, your grace. I refuse because I will not be bought off like a servant who has done something shameful. I have served this house with honor. I will not leave it in disgrace." The door opened. Julian stood in the doorway, his face white with rage. He looked first at Clara, then at his mother. He had heard enough. "If Mrs. Henshaw leaves," he said, and his voice was terrifyingly quiet, "I leave with her. I will close Blackwood House. I will resign my seat in Lords. And you may explain to the county, to the king, and to yourself why the pride of the Ashworth name was built on the backs of women you would sooner cast out than respect." The dowager stared at him. Her mouth opened, then closed. "Julian, do not speak to me of duty, mother. You have spent my life telling me what I owe this family. I owe it nothing, but I owe this woman something, and I intend to pay it." He walked to Clara. He did not touch her, but he stood close, close enough that she could feel the heat of his anger. "Mrs. Henshaw," he said, "you may go about your duties. My mother and I will speak privately." Clara curtsied, a small, formal movement. She left the room without a backward glance. But as she walked down the corridor, she heard the dowager's voice rise behind her, and Julian's voice answer, low and hard. In her room, Clara sat on the edge of her bed and pressed her hands to her face. She did not want this. She did not want to be the cause of a war between mother and son, but she could not leave Daisy, and she could not leave him. The truth of that thought made her stomach drop. She stood and walked to the window, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. She cared for Julian Ashworth, not as a housekeeper for her master, as a woman. And that caring would destroy them both if she did not bury it. The dinner party at Hargreave Hall was meant to be a triumph for its host. Lord Marcus Hargreave had spent weeks arranging the guest list, the menu, the music. He had made certain that the Duke of Ashworth would be seated near the head of the table, and that the housekeeper of Blackwood House would be present in the room as an object of silent ridicule. Hargreave wanted Julian's political support in the Lords. Julian had refused it twice. Now Hargreave had found a weapon. The letter arrived during the second course. A footman brought it on a silver tray and presented it to Hargreave with a bow. Hargreave made a show of opening it, his brows lifting in mock surprise. "It seems we have an unexpected document," he announced to the table. "A letter, addressed to me, containing certain details of the Duke of Ashworth's private accounts, and a confession." Julian's knife paused over his plate. His face betrayed nothing. Clara stood near the sideboard, supervising the service. She watched Hargreave unfold the paper and heard the rustle as every guest turned to listen. "It is signed by Mrs. Clara Henshaw," Hargreave said, "the Duke's housekeeper. It describes, in her own hand, a romantic liaison with the Duke and asks for money in exchange for her silence." The table erupted, chairs scraped. A woman gasped. Lady Penford looked as if she had been handed a crown. Hargreave began to read aloud. The words were vile and precise. Clara heard her own name attached to acts she had never committed, sentiments she had never expressed, and a demand for £5,000. She did not move. She stood with her back straight and her hands folded, and she let him read. When he finished, he looked at Clara with a small, cold smile. "Well, Mrs. Henshaw, have you anything to say?" The room turned to her, 30 faces hungry and bright. Clara took a breath. She did not raise her voice. "That letter is not in my hand," she said. "My writing is taught, my lord, by the parish school at Whitmore. I can prove it within the hour." Hargreaves' smile flickered. "A convenient claim." "A testable one," Clara said. "If your grace will permit, I will provide a sample of my writing now, in the presence of these guests, and any fair-minded person may compare it to the letter you hold." Julian stood. He did not look at Hargreave, he looked at Clara. "A pen and paper," he said, "at once." A footman brought them. Clara walked to the side table near the window. The guests watched in perfect silence as she seated herself, dipped the pen, and wrote a single line in her clear, steady hand. "I have served Blackwood House with honor, and I have never asked for money beyond my wages." Julian took the paper. He held it up beside the forged letter. The difference was obvious at once. Clara's hand was neat, the letters formed with a schoolroom precision. The forgery was slanted, its loops careless, its spelling uneven. The room was very quiet. Julian turned to Hargreave. "You have brought a forged document into your own dining room," he said. "You have accused an innocent woman of extortion and moral ruin. You have done this to pressure me into supporting your political ambitions. I will not support them. I will not support you. And I will see to it that every man and woman at this table knows exactly what kind of man you are." Hargreaves' face had gone the color of milk. "Ashworth, You will leave this table," Julian said. "You will leave your own dinner, or I will call for the magistrate and have you arrested for slander." Hargreave did not move. Julian stepped toward him, and something in his face made Hargreave rise, stumble back, and walk from the room without another word. The guests sat frozen. No one knew where to look. Clara remained at the side table, the pen still in her hand. Her face was calm, but her hands were shaking. Julian crossed the room. He did not speak. He took the pen from her fingers and set it down. Then, under the edge of the sideboard, out of sight of the guests, he took her hand. She did not pull away. His grip was warm and steady. His thumb moved over her knuckles once, twice. "You are not alone in this," he said very low. Clara closed her eyes for an instant. When she opened them, they were bright, but no tears fell. "I know," she said. The dinner ended shortly after. The guests departed in small, uneasy groups. Clara stood by the carriage with Daisy asleep in her arms, and Julian stood beside her, and neither of them spoke on the drive home. But their hands rested on the seat between them, not quite touching, yet close enough that the warmth of his skin was a promise Clara did not dare name. The announcement came on a Tuesday morning, without warning and without apology. Julian had not spoken of it. He had simply ordered the carriage, driven to the village parish, and posted a letter to the county journal. The letter declared that the Duke of Ashworth intended to marry Mrs. Clara Henshaw, head housekeeper of Blackwood House, in a private ceremony at the end of the season. The county exploded. By noon, 3 families had called at Blackwood House demanding an explanation. By evening, the dowager had arrived, white-faced and trembling, not with rage but with something closer to fear. "You will ruin this family," she said to Julian in the study. "You will make us a laughingstock from London to Edinburgh." Julian stood by the window. "I will marry her, mother. You may accept it or you may leave. She is a servant. She is the woman who saved a child from starvation. She is the woman who stood in your drawing room and refused your bribe. She is the woman who stood in Hargreaves' dining room and did not weep while a forged letter accused her of whoredom. She is more noble than half the peerage I have met, and I will spend the rest of my life proving to her that I know it." The dowager stared at him. Then she turned and walked out of the study. She did not leave the house. She went upstairs to her old rooms and closed the door. Clara was in the garden when the news reached her. She had taken Daisy to pick early roses. The child ran ahead, her white dress bright against the hedges, and Clara followed slowly, her mind full of quiet things. Mrs. Bell came hurrying down the gravel path. "The Duke has posted an announcement," she said, breathless. "He means to marry you." Clara stopped walking. The roses in her basket seemed suddenly too heavy. "He has not asked me," she said. "He did not need to ask," Mrs. Bell said. "The whole county knows he loves you." Clara looked at the house. It stood in the morning sun, the windows flashing like mirrors. She had walked its corridors for 9 years. She had never once imagined herself as its mistress. She found Julian in the library. He was standing at the fireplace, one hand braced on the mantel, his back to the door. He did not turn when she entered. "You have announced a marriage I have not agreed to," she said. "I know. That is not a proposal, Your Grace. That is a command." He turned. His face was haggard as if he had not slept. "I did not know how else to do it. Every time I try to speak to you, I lose my words. Every time I look at you, I become a boy. I posted the announcement because I was a coward." Clara stared at him. "You are many things, Julian Ashworth. I did not think a coward was one of them." His face changed. He crossed the room toward her, and then he did something that stopped her breath. He knelt. "Marry me," he said. "Not because I have announced it, not because the county expects it. Marry me because I cannot imagine this house without your footstep in the corridor, because I cannot close my eyes without seeing you in the rain, walking away with a child's hand in yours. Because I do not see a cause, Clara. I do not see a rebellion. I see the only woman who has ever made me wish to be worthy of her." Clara looked down at him. Her heart was pounding. Her hands were clenched at her sides. "I will not marry a man who sees me as a cause," she said, and her voice broke on the word. "I am not a project. I am not a public reform. I am a woman who has been dismissed, mocked, lied about, and paraded before the county. And I have survived all of it alone. I will not be pitied." Julian reached up and took her hand. His grip was warm and rough, and his eyes were bright with something she had never seen in him before. "I do not pity you," he said. "I am in awe of you. I have been in awe of you since the moment I saw you kneel in the mud for a child who had nothing. Clara, I am not asking you to be my duchess. I am asking you to let me be your husband. There is a difference. I want to be worthy of that difference." The library was very quiet. Outside, a bird sang in the yew tree. Somewhere above, Daisy laughed. Clara looked at the man kneeling before her. She thought of the rain, the tablecloth, the forged letter, the dance. She thought of every time he had stood beside her, and every time he had let her stand alone. She placed her free hand on his head. She did not know why. It was a gesture her mother had used, a benediction. "Rise," she said softly. He rose. He was close, close enough that she could see the flecks of gray in his eyes. "I will marry you," she said. "Not because you have announced it, because I cannot imagine living without you, and that terrifies me more than any scandal." Julian pulled her into his arms. He did not kiss her. He held her, his face buried in her hair, and she felt him tremble not from cold, but from a relief so deep it had no words. They stood that way for a long time. 6 months later, at the harvest ball, Clara Henshaw became the Duchess of Ashworth in fact as well as name. She wore deep green velvet. The gown was cut to her form, unapologetic, rich as moss. Her hair was dressed high, threaded with emeralds. She walked into the ballroom on Julian's arm, and the room did not go silent. It went still with something else, recognition. Julian danced only with Clara. He danced only with his wife. And when the music ended, he raised her hand and kissed it in full view of the county. Daisy watched from the minstrel's gallery, wearing a new white dress with blue ribbons, her hair shining. She clapped, and the sound was the first thing to break the stillness. Then others clapped. Then the room was full of applause, not for the dress or the scandal, but for the quiet, unbreakable dignity of a woman who had once walked through the rain with a tablecloth in her hand and a child in her arms. Clara looked up at Julian. "You have given me everything," she said. He shook his head. "My love, you gave me back my own heart." The music began again. They danced. And for the first time in her life, Clara Henshaw, housekeeper of Blackwood House, Duchess of Ashworth, allowed herself to be happy. She did not look back at the rain. She did not need to. She had found the light on the other side.